This is September the 3rd, 1988. I'm Bill Welge for the Oklahoma Historical Society, and I'm interviewing Artie Nesvold.
Nesvold.
A Wyandotte Indian. Please give me your full name and date of birth, please.
My name is Artie Sarah Pecor Nesvold. I was born January 19, 1913.
1913. Where were you born?
Beaumont, Texas.
Beaumont, Texas. Okay, now what were the names of your parents?
My father was E.J. Pecor. My mother was Artie Smith Pecor.
And how did they end up in Beaumont as far as...
They had both gone to Indian schools and met in Tomah, Wisconsin. My father was the disciplinarian for the boys. My mother was the matron for the little boys' dormitory. They met and married there.
Do you know what year they married?
1904. They came through St. Louis and stopped at the World's Fair and came on to Wyandotte because my mother came back to where her mother lived. My mother was born in White Church, Kansas, before they moved down to Wyandotte.
What year was she born?
1878.
78. And when was your father born?
1877.
1877. And where was he born? Do you remember?
At Coudray, Wisconsin.
Okay, now which of your family members are Wyandotte?
My mother is the Wyandotte, and my father is Chippewa. Chippewa,
okay. I'm curious because the Pecor name is very prevalent down in the Potawatomi tribe.
Well, yes, and some of the relation in the Second Fox are my close relation. My father's brother Frank married a Second Fox lady down there, and have had several children.
I see. Well, how many brothers and sisters do you have?
I had a brother and I had a sister. They're both gone.
I see. And what were the names of your grandparents?
My mother's parents were Nancy Johnson Smith, and her husband, my mother's father, was Azer Wilson Smith, that she met in Kansas.
I see. Okay, now you say you're born in Beaumont, Texas. How long did you live there?
4 months.
4 months.
But I went back my high school senior year and went to school there.
So between the 4 months of your high school senior year, where were you at?
My father worked for the government schools, and when I was 4 months old, we moved from Beaumont, Texas to Browning, Montana. We were at Browning for several years. He was transferred to Poplar, Montana. That was called Fort Peck. There till I was 10 years old. Government officials, government people, employees were moved around. We moved from there to Rosebud, South Dakota. From there to Fort Defiance, Arizona. From there back to Fort Thompson, South Dakota. Then to Ignacio, Colorado.
But he never served in any capacity in Indian schools in Oklahoma.
No. Oh yes. Before I was born, the first years here, he was disciplinarian at the Indian school, Seneca Indian School. My father was right over here at Seneca Indian.
In the Seneca, okay.
Mm-hmm. Of course, it was they called it Seneca Indian School, but we know it as not that school, that Indian school.
Okay. And did he remain a disciplinarian throughout his career, or did he move up in the...
Well, he built on up, because after he was that, then he was assistant principal, then he was principal, then he was superintendent.
I see. And is that what he retired?
That's when he left. That's what he was. He was superintendent.
When did he leave the Indian service?
sometime in the early 40s. I can't remember when, because he moved on, and he left us, and he remarried, and he worked in Portland, Oregon, and that's where he died.
I see.
In 44.
1944. Okay. And your mother, what did she do after he left? I mean.
Well, after he left, for a year or two, she was able to manage all right. Then she went to work, and she helped keep a boarding house, grooming house for young men at Boulder, Colorado.
Boulder, Colorado. Okay.
And that's where she was the rest of her life then.
I see. So, about what time, how old were you at the time when this all?
Well, when I was 18 and married, when they separated.
I see.
And so I came on here then.
Okay, now, where did you meet your husband?
Right here in Wyandotte, Oklahoma.
Now, were you already here at the time?
Every summer, Mother brought my sister and I, and we came to Wyandotte to stay with her mother. We spent the summer here. Some of the time, my sister and I stayed the summers without her, without my parents or without Mother, and other times Mother was with us. We spent the summers here, and that's where I met Harold, right here. His father and mother lived at the Indian school, and his father and my father were acquainted as boys in Hayward, Wisconsin, and my mother and his mother, she was his stepmother, but his mother, were acquainted right here in this area, because that's where it was, all right here in this area, because at that time it was early days, it was called a reserve, and that's where they lived.
What is the full name of your husband, and when was he born?
His name was Harold Nesvold. He was born December 10th, 1911.
1911. And the name of his parents?
His father was Ira James Nesvold. He lived in Wisconsin. He was Chipway. And his real mother lived in Washington State. She was Leela Laverne Nesvold. She died when he was a young man, 12, 14, something like that. And he came to live with his father at Wyandotte, between here and Seneca. And his stepmother was Charlotte D. Boone. She was a descendant of the Walker family.
I see. Any ideas of the origin of the Nesvold name?
Albert Nesvold came from Europe. He was a Norwegian. A number of their family came. They were woodcutters, lumbermen, things like that. And when he came, he was the cook in a lumber camp in Wisconsin. You know, then they had tall trees up there. The trees grow very tall, and the lumber business was a big thing at that time. He married Harold's grandmother, who was a Chippewa Indian. Only half. She was half. No, she was. No, it was her daughter that was half.
And so, what is your husband's blood degree, and what is your blood degree?
Harold is a quarter blood Chippewa. The rest is Norwegian and whatever. I'm 3/32.
What are your earliest remembrances of growing up every summer coming to Wyandotte? What do you remember the most about that?
I don't know what I remember the most about it. Coming from the other areas, the temperature's different. That's all different. Coming to Grandma's was a very special thing. Wyandotte was a special little town. It still is in my mind. I can think of all the lovely little, it's like a storybook town to me. I can see all the elderly ladies that used to go around in town and things that way. Uh, and I had relatives here that made it very special and all.
Did your grandmother, when you would live with her, did she tell you very many stories of the tribe, or do you recall anything like that?
Grandmother didn't talk very much until the year I was a senior. She always knew my mother, my father, my brother, my sister were dark. They showed all the Indian. They were dark, had dark hair, dark eyes. I was blonde-headed, blue-eyed, had long curls, and she thought that was wonderful. Every summer we came, I had a new sunbonnet, and I had to wear the sunbonnet. She didn't want me to get tanned. She wanted me to stay blonde.
Mm-hmm.
She wanted me to stay, and she was special to me. I finally learned her story. She finally told me her story, but she didn't tell quite all of it. She told me how she and my grandfather were before they got married, and how, but she didn't tell me any of these things until my senior year in high school. Maybe because we didn't have time to talk about it before or something, and maybe it was just because we were visiting just the two of us.
Mm-hmm.
But she told how her parents didn't want her to marry my grandfather. Well, didn't really understand until a long time later. He was 10 years older than she was. And, but she insisted, and her mother said, you don't have things ready for you to stop to get married. But she said, I got ready. The other girls had one quilt, I made two. The other girls had one shut mattress, I made two, and I cut the shut 3 times. They just cut theirs twice. Once. I cut mine 3 times, made 3 pieces, made it softer and fluffier. Everything that she had to get ready, she made twice as many. That was her way all her life. She knew she worked at it hard to get it. She made sure she had it, and she took care of it all her life. She didn't let anyone smoke in her house. She didn't let anybody come in the house with dirty shoes. Listen, she was very particular, and some people think harshly of her. But if you knew her life and how she did and how she got it, well, years after she died, going over some of the records I have, I found out why. She was only 14 when she married, and my grandfather was 24. She didn't tell me that then.
Well, now, what year was she married then, if she was 14?
She married on September 16th, 1874.
So she was born in 1860.
Mm-hmm.
And how old of a woman did she live to be?
73, I think.
Really? So you have some very vivid memories.
Oh, yes, I do. She was one of the ladies in town that, in Wyandotte, they did all their work up in the mornings. They had a lunch cleaned up out of themselves, changed their dresses to soft, billowy lawn dresses, and they visited each other. Mm-hmm. And that's the way I think of Wyandotte, that dear little friendly town.
What was the economic base for Wyandotte at this time when you were growing up? Was it based on agriculture, or did it have other industries that allowed the town to prosper, or do you know?
At one point, Wyandotte could have grown. Then they had a terrible fire. A whole block of buildings and stores were burned. And at one time, Wyandotte was the center of the county because it was the largest town. And then mysteriously, Miami took over. It never has been a prosperous town. It's just a town where people lived and worked elsewhere. Things that was there.
So I imagine most people who live here work in Miami or other places.
Now, they do now.
Do you recall what year the fire was that destroyed the city block?
Got a cough. During the teens. Sometimes in the teens. I don't know exactly when.
I want to get back to some of your impressions. You moved around quite a bit in various Indian agencies. What do you recall of some of those moves? I mean, those were quite, I would guess, isolated places.
They were, all Indian schools are far away because they were on the reservations and things like that. Rosebud today doesn't have a boarding school. Rosebud, South Dakota. And those were the Sioux Indians. At Fort Thompson, which was south of Chamberlain, those Indians there are not well, I guess they're just farmers and that kind. They were not Indians who clan together. And they're another group of Sioux. Montana, when we lived in Poplar, Montana, I was very young when we lived at Browning. Browning is in that area is where the lowest temperatures in the United States during the winter.
Oh, really?
Yes, Browning, coldest temperatures. Cut Bank and Browning, they're in the same place.
What was the coldest you ever recall it being while you were there?
I don't remember the cold things there, but it was cold enough that everything was heated with coal. The houses and things that way. My mother told about they had gone someplace, and I was still a real little child, and I wore a Angora furry cap. And when they came in that night, Mother sat down close to the stove, and I was still in my wraps, and my father opened the stove and shook it, and this chimney came out, and the pipe just fell down right on top of us. All that black coal stuff.
Oh my word.
Accidents like that happen, I've enjoyed. I have pleasant, lovely memories of all these places, and some of them I have someone to see or talk to every once in a while. All these places. Fort Defiance, Arizona, is no longer like it was when I was there because Fort Defiance is run now by the tribe itself. They have their own people that run the tribe. Everything is Navajo.
I see. When you married, did you stay here in Wyandotte, or did you go elsewhere? What did you do after that activity?
Are you sure you want me to tell you this?
Well, sure.
2 summers I knew Harold. The first summer, my grandmother's husband, which was my mother's real uncle, so it was her stepfather, passed away, and we brought the body. He was in Arizona, in Ignacio, Colorado with us, and we came back with the body to my grandmother's here in Wyandotte. And that summer, we spent the summer here. Well, Harold was living with his parents at the Indian school, and he came down, and because my mother and father were here, and his mother and father, they were longtime friends, he came to to the house to see us. And he tells it a little different than I tell it, because he was a junior in high school that year. And my grandmother was very particular about who her grandchildren associate with. She studied a long time before she let us go into other people's homes to visit or anything. And when we did, we had to act like ladies. We were just girls.
Mm-hmm.
But she was very particular about it, and that's the way it was. Harold came the one year, 1930, in the summer. He came by to see us. We had a young cousin, my mother's cousin, so I would be a second cousin or so, came, and he was the same age. So there was the four of us that kind of palled around a little bit. The next summer, that year, I went to Beaumont to school. And when I came back in the summer, I was here, and Harold's ideas were getting to be serious. Well, when I left I was to leave, my mother and I were to leave to go back to Colorado, where Dad was, and I was going on to go to college. He says, it didn't take him long, but I said it took longer, and he says, to talk me in to go and get married. That was running away. That was eloping.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I went. And there's a long story of that I don't want to put in here if you want to hear about it. But we were married. We went and got married and hurried right back. And my mother was so mad because we were late getting there. The next morning, she and I started for Colorado. And I went on and went to school at Fort Collins, Colorado. A friend of his, one of his classmates, was working for his mother and did her housekeeping because she was working also. The young girl got into Harold's things and found our marriage license. Well, we weren't going to tell about it for 4 years because I said, 3 things. We're not going to tell about it now. We're not going to speak about it. It's just going to be a secret, and we'll just keep it. When I come back, I am going to go to college. My dad is willing to do it, and we're going there because my sister could also go the next year. But she told it. So when it was out, I came back.
Well, what year was this?
31.
31.
Mm-hmm.
And did you not go on to school at all?
No, I didn't go on to school at all, and that it wouldn't have been feasible for us to do that. His father was here and wasn't very well at the time, and so I didn't go on back to school. I regretted it, but then.
Well, what did your grandmother have to say?
That's another bad story. She didn't talk to me for about several days when it came out, and finally she said, Mother was gone. She said, Artie, Sarah, whose fault was it you had to get married? I said, Grandma, it was no one's fault. We didn't have to get married. But I don't know if she believed me or not.
Mm-hmm. Well, at least you were a little older than she was when you married.
Yes, yes.
So after you married, did you put roots down here? Or did
we lived our living on his mother and father's farm. They did to him when his father died first in 1945, and we lived with his mother and took care of her, and she did the farm to him.
Mm-hmm. And so you
we raised our children there, 6 children.
6 children. How many boys and how many girls?
4 boys and 2 girls.
Okay. And
17 grandchildren, 10 great-grandchildren.
Wow. So I take it all your children are still living? And,
yes. We have all of them. They're all living.
Do any of them live here in the area, or are they all scattered all over?
Well, most of them live in this area. I have a son. His family live in Tulsa. He's not living there right now. He's off working. I have a son that lives in Seneca, and he's the municipal judge in there. He works. I have a son who lives very close to us because he took his share of the farm and built a home there. His one of his daughters, my granddaughter, is one of the cooks out here.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how large is the farm?
It was 102 acres first. All we've got left of it is the 86 acres because we gave him, we did 102 acres divided by 6 comes out, you see, 16 acres. So he has his 16 acres and built him a house on it. He will be more than likely be the only one who lives on the place. The others all have homes someplace else.
Mm-hmm. He seems to be the only one.
Well, he's the only one. He instead of going into town or someplace else, he was willing to have his section there and build him a house. I would love to have a nice home.
So this is you've made your home since 1931.
First year we weren't here. We went with his family, with Mr. and Miss Nesvold, away. He was in the Indian Service and he was transferred to Utah. We went there, but that year we came back in '32 and we've been here most of the time.
I see. When did you find an interest or take an interest in the tribal history and your family history?
While I was growing up, in every school, all the different tribes I've known, I would say, well, I'm Indian too. And of course I was blonde and blue-eyed and fair skinned. And they would always go, because they were darker, had straight hair, you know, and mine was curly. They thought it was funny. But I was Indian. I knew I was Indian. And they said, what kind of Indian are you? I said, I'm a Wyandotte. They had never even heard of it, especially the Blackfeet and the Crees up in northern Montana. They didn't know anything about that, you know. The Sioux people are dark skinned and have black hair, you know.
And so because of...
But I always knew I was Indian. I said I was Indian, you know. And if I'd known what a little bit I was, you know, I might have not been so loud in it, but but I was Indian, and I'm still Indian. I've always known. My brother and sister didn't feel like I did, you know. So, and I always was interested in those kind of things. And when I came to live with Harold's mother, she had papers and things that she was just keeping. Really didn't understand all the things that she was keeping because they were papers and pamphlets and ledgers and things that B.N.O. Walker, her uncle, he was the chief clerk over here at the Miami agency, and he had these. They were just left over and put aside or something.
And what time period did these records cover?
Well, I have one of the original rolls of the 1855 treaty, all written by hand. Then we have a clear up through that time letters, personal letters, business letters, some ledgers. We have one of the little books that was they had their Constitution written in it when after they moved down here to Wyandotte.
Oh, really?
Some of it's hard to read. It's faded, you know. Their ink is faded.
Does any of the material have some of the Wyandotte language written in it, or
no? None of that, huh? Because they were at that time. There were a lot of them that talked Wyandotte. Mrs. Nesvold's grandmother was Mary Williams, married Isaiah Walker, and she talked to me. She talked Wyandotte, and there were a number of others, and she's one of the ones that Mr. Barbu has on his tapes that he made.
This was done around the turn of the century.
1911 and 1912 he came out. He was here most of 2 summers. He didn't stay during the winter. He went back home.
And he came down from the Smithsonian?
No, he came back from Canadian. He
Oh.
came from a Canadian. Where it is, Quebec, or I don't know where it is.
Do you have copies of these tapes, or do you know who does, or?
Mr. Buser has these some. I have a copy. We made a copy for me, but but the recorder that I use it on is not in working order, and they're the large reels.
No, the reel-to-reel tapes.
And so I can't use them anymore. I have them.
Is it possible that we could get copies of this? Because we have reel-to-reel recorders at the
Yes.
Historical Society.
Yes. Yes.
And this would be a valuable thing to add to our
Yes.
collection. And what we could do is we could then transfer from the reel-to-reel to a cassette for you.
Oh,
And if
that'd be good.
if you have a
Yes,
cassette
uh-huh,
recorder,
yes.
then you at least
Mhm.
you'd still have the
Have the
master
things.
copy, but then you'd have another copy that would
Yes.
be more convenient because there's not that many reel-to-reels
Yes. No.
being manufactured.
And I don't think it's worthwhile trying to get it. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, except that it's just well, it's 20 years old or something like that, and it's something like that when Mr. Buser gave me the one. He had known that those tapes were in Canada, and for a long time they didn't want to use it. They didn't take it out. They didn't make copies or do anything with it. And there's some Sue's talking on it. There's some some tales, and some songs, and some talking on it. And he was free. He nice to do it for us.
The material that it sounds like this, the B&O Walker papers are just in themselves are valuable, and
Yes, they are. They are valuable for the tribe. They're valuable. We use some of them. Juanita knows that we used some of them, and we made some copies of them when we were doing our claims. I don't know if they were a help. I'm sure they must have been, but then the things that were in there,
Well, it's important that these things be preserved.
Oh, yes.
And,
As I say, under my bed is stuffed.
Well, the 1855, as I mentioned before, don't laminate it.
No, okay,
We
well,
can-
I
we
didn't
can-
know, that's what I thought that's what,
But that would be
Okay.
something if we could get a copy of too, because that's something we absolutely don't have at all, as far as a census, early census record for the Wyandottes.
Now, that's why I wrote this book. It's by Marius Barber. And it has those little stories.
Yes, I have one like that. It's hard copy though, of that same book.
But you know who told me about this book? Guy Jennison.
Yes,
The lady,
yes,
she was the
yes,
author.
because he was in that age group, like that. That's the reason.
When did you get involved in tribal politics?
When they reorganized in 36, 37, whatever year it was,
And
I came back and I had 2 little children and was with Mrs. Nesvold, and she was Wyandotte, and we just started going to the meetings. Those years they had an annual meeting. In September they had a meeting because there was nothing to do. There was no money to do anything with. Nobody had. All we did at those years, we had a chief. What else do we have? Chief, and do we have second chief and secretary and treasurer? For things we had those.
well, in 1936, was it a hereditary or elected chief?
It was elected.
Elected.
We haven't had a hereditary for a long time. That stopped way back in the 1800s sometimes.
And who was the chief at the time when you became involved in the tribal politics?
I I don't know if Leonard Cotter was the chief first or not, because we had several. Who else did we have?
Alan Johnson.
Well, I guess so. I guess Alan Johnson was it, because right after that is when we sold the Indian school land, and he was the one that was the chief then. Mm-hmm.
And when did you serve on the tribal council now?
Now,
Business
I'm
committee?
on the business committee now.
In 1936, was it common for women to be involved in the tribe, or was it all men at that time?
Well, we had our secretary was Ruth Waters, and we always had a woman secretary and things like that. We very seldom had. We didn't have any. There were men as first and second chief, and that's the only ones we had. We didn't have any other people helping on the tribe, because there was nothing to do. We tried to, and they thought of things to do, and we talked about it, things, but there was nothing. We had no way of starting anything. We didn't have any money.
About how large was the tribe at that time in the 30s?
Well, sometimes we'd have anyway between 40 and 70 members at an annual meeting, especially if we had talked up something, to talk about, and our claims were already started. But the claim for getting the money from the Ohio land, it was still, that's something we always talked about.
When was that originated, and I know these things take forever, it seemed like, to finally get approved by the government, but when were the lands sold and the claims to?
The land was sold in 1843.
I see.
When the tribe left, the lands were sold. Government took it back and sold them, and put the money in. That money was ours. We had to go to court to get the money from it, and that, from the earliest time I can remember, we had a lawyer who was talking to us about it. We had lawyers from Miami, 2 or 3 or 4 in Miami. We had a lawyer in Joplin that helped for a long time, and time went on, and these men aged and died off, and we got new ones and built some more. I believe we could count up about 10 lawyers during those years, and then finally we got the Edwards people in Minneapolis, I think they live, and he finished up our claim then when we finished and got the money set aside.
And when did that take place?
We drew our money in 85, but it's before 80.
So it took over 100 years.
Oh yes, a long time, And we had to go to court. We had to prove all the points of the prices of the land. That's what we were using some of these old records that I have about what kind of farms they had, what they had. And so we've learned a lot of things. We learned how they did back there, and what good farmers they were, and the things that they were doing, our ancestors. And a lot of them don't understand that, but we learned it through these kind of things, that they were prosperous people. Last year I went back there. We went back in October, a group of us, to a meeting in Ohio, and some of the friends, Mrs. Thelma Marsh and Aubrey Buser and different ones, took me around to places, and I saw 2 very special houses there. One of them is a lovely 2-story house, painted all white. It's been white for 140 years. Another house was the house that William Walker lived in right down the street from where I was staying, and it was on the steps of this house the auctioneer stood and sold the extra things that the Wyandottes left were going to leave. They couldn't bring everything that they had when they moved from Ohio to Kansas, and the things that they left, pots and pans, houses, wagons, animals, property, and they were sold from those steps. That's where the auctioneer stood. And that house is as nice as any house, wood framed house, painted. That's
And I take it there are no lands left in Ohio of any kind as far as claims of the Wyandottes or any Wyandottes in that area.
I don't think so. I think the lands were all in that section, and they were all sold. Maybe not right then. I don't think those. The auctioneer wasn't selling the lands; they were selling just the property, as anybody does now. You move on, you have an auction or whatever you want to call it, and sell your extra stuff here. That's what they were doing then. But I don't think there are any lands that belong to Wyandottes now as Wyandottes. No. Some people, there were some in Kansas after they had moved from Ohio to Kansas, made that long trip. The next year, there were several that went back up there and lived and died up there. And one especially that they still revere in that town as a very special person. She lived a long time. Mother Solomon was a very special person. She was. She had been married, and her family died, and another man, Mr. Solomon, I don't remember his first name, his family died. They married, and went back up there and spent the rest of their life up there.
With the regard of the final settlement, what was the per capita payment on the settlement for
When we got paid in '85, 1,300 and some dollars a piece.
You would think with all the interest that should have accrued over the.
Well, it had grown. They awarded us $3 million and something for the whole thing. Well, it was in the bank, federal bank, and it grew when it was finally divided. It was $5 million.
I see.
And but we have a large. There are a lot of us now. Right now, we have 3,400 on our rolls.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I wouldn't have thought that many.
Well, there's been for years. They said there were about 700. Well, people, just like I said, they thought there'd never be a time when they'd want to claim it again. They did in their hearts, but then they didn't put it down on paper. We're going to vote this afternoon, and there are 50-some babies to be voted on.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. They keep good, and they put their name on, but we vote them in on annual meeting day.
Well, now, how do you go about as far as your enrollment process? Do you have any background checks, or how do you do that?
They have to be a person on the roll, and the girl's maiden name and proof of marriage has to be. We have to get that, and the baby's state birth certificate, not a hospital one or something. It has to be state certificate to know what it is and put on it. And it's there'll be a list put up. It's printed out here someplace. They'll have it up and you can see who they are, and all. And then we vote on them.
When did the population begin to increase?
Well, way back when they first started talking about it, we finally interested in people in doing it. More would do it all the time. Then, of course, when it came out, it was advertised widely about for us to get the names on the roll. Had to be on there and had to have proof. They didn't even skip one generation. It had to be a continuous generation enrollment. Right And of course, that was started in 1700 sometimes, and we've been on. That's what we are. That is what makes us an Indian tribe. The government started it. We've kept on, and that's what made us a tribe.
Well, now, what changes have you seen as far as the operations of the tribal government with regards to its people? Say, when you first got involved in the 30s, because they had no money and they only had the two officials, and I take it they generally worked out of the Miami area office for the various tribes in this area.
Not having any money, you can't even fulfill one little idea. You can, one person could. When each one of them, they would talk together and all. But if we could just do this, if we just had our money, when they first talked about getting, before I even started in it, talking about, if we got $100, we thought we were going to get a whole lot, and then when it came out that there was 3 million, from then on, people finally accepted and put their names in. And we've got very few people who are quarter blood, but on the rolls we do say because they've kept it like that. And whether we have any quarter bloods, I really don't know at this time. 100 years ago, the people, in talking about it, said there were no half-bloods then.
Oh, really?
But of course, now, Leaford, our chief, he looks more Indian than I do. He said his father told him, and his grandmother told him, his mother told him about things like that. So, I don't know. Maybe there is more in some of them, for some of them. Like that. They've kept more Indian, married in more Indian. Of course, now, myself, the first record we have of my family way back is when the white man married the first Indian. Well, okay, the first child was just half-blood. Well, he married a full-blood. Well, and that gave my great-grandmother, she was just 3/4. And see how fast it fades away.
Well, the government, in setting up the blood quantum system, more or less, has devised a way that with the continual dilution of the blood, that they feel like after a certain period of time, they no longer have to assist the citizens. And
I know, and we say, okay, there are some people, they say, if there's the tiniest speck in that family, take the colored blood. They go back several generations, they still say it, and there's no way you can prove how little of it, but they count that. Well, we shouldn't have to fight for what we are. If we're Indian, and we say we're Indian. I'm Indian. I'm Wyandotte Indian. It don't make any difference how little it gets. I have great-grandchildren. Now you divide that up and put that fraction out to see what they are. But they're Indian too. Now we have some little ones that look like they might be Indian to show that you. But of course it's very little.
But many of the BIA programs more or less exclude them from being able to
Education
take
Education department has always been strong on whatever they say about you had to be quarter. And the Wyandottes get in there. Once in a while, like there was some way or other they could get around the blood quantum, and they could go for because were needy, or something that way, you know, and they could still get them in.
Well, now, has it been since the decision and you received the claims that you were able to build your tribal complex and begin to do things for your people?
Just before we got our money was divided for us. The government stepped in and they gave each of the tribes, they had to apply for it, some monies to set up an office. Juanita, what year did you have the first office over in that little building over there behind the?
Well, it had to be in 1976 because I had just came back from the Smithsonian, and I said I had a job next Monday. And our first job was set up out at the Indian Action Team building.
They gave each of the tribes that applied for it money to have an office and some equipment. And it started from there. We built it up each time. We get a little better office and got a little better office and all, and a little better office, and then our building here is better than any of it. And this building, we asked for a grant to build an office, and that grant was given to us in '77. And the building was finished and was dedicated by '78.
The programs as far as well, let me back up. When did you have an official constitution for the Wyandottes? Did you?
Well, when we reorganized in '36 and '37, right after that, we had to have the Constitution and all the rest of the things that go with it, charter, all that. We have that.
And have you revised the Constitution?
Yes, we have. We have 5 years ago when Mr. Breskin, Chief Breskin, was sworn in. Well, just soon after that, then he had revised it because he took it. They gave it to him, and he talked it over, and then we went over it phrase by phrase and agreed or disagreed about the things and got it and sent it in. And when he sent it in, government offices are very slow. They have more than just your affairs that tend to and all. So it took a long time, but he was very persistent. He followed the papers up, and for every step it was, he phoned and talked to them. He finally got it and came back. We had to revise a phrase or two, and then voted on it and accept our new constitution. It needs to be revised again in a very few years. We're finding some things that we need to do, and we hope that other people can see it when those time come for us to do that. We will be revising it sometime soon. Not this year, not the next year, just to do it.
Well, when they, I take it in the 36, 37 Constitution, they had provisions for elected officials and a business committee or a tribal committee.
Business committee. It's just like it's set up now. We have added a little bit of something or other. We have the grievance committee. We have the business committee. There are 3 of us on it. We have secretary and second chief, the first chief. Those were all in there right from the start.
And when were you first elected to office?
I served before, but this time, for this period, when Leeper went in 5 years ago.
And this is he's serving his first term?
This is his 3rd term. This is his third term now.
Elected for 2-year periods?
2-year periods, and it's staggered, one every other year, so that this time we're going to be re-electing, we hope, our second chief and one council member and 3 business the grievance committee. One of the grievance committee personnel lives too far away, so.
In the previous constitution, before it was revised, the chief was, they were elected, but were they, I take it that Chief Zane was in for a number of years.
Yes, we had every one of our chiefs were in for quite a few years, different times that way, but we weren't doing anything. There wasn't anything to do. They didn't have any money. They wanted to, and maybe some of those men, if there had been money or something for us to work with, maybe some of them would have done good things.
But they just, more or less because of the lack of it.
Yes, it was lack of money, and in early days when they worked together, over here at Wyandotte, in the Wyandotte town, they had their own policeman, they had their own judge, they had their own people right there, and they all worked together as a group. I don't think they were ever paid, but they lived right there close. They handled divorce cases, they handled cases between people, right up, and that's all in their papers, in their accounts, tells about it, things that way. But now we have our people have to live within a certain distance so that they can get here at meetings and things. And right now, of course, since we have the building and the things that are going on, our programs that are going on, they have to get here quickly. They have to come fast. They have to be close. Now, none of our business committee, none of the 6, none of the grievance committee, our chief, second chief, and secretary, none of us are paid. We don't draw any money. If we are sent on a trip, then the money for it comes out of some fund that they can manage.
Well, now, how does the tribe generate any funds for operations?
Through the grants, so the programs they get through the government, and each one of them has so much set aside in those programs for travel or something, if that's necessary. The HUD program, building programs, and HIP programs, these people who go and take care of the outside work, the inspecting and such as that, that has come out of some of our funds right here, and we have very few funds of them. We have no money for all of these extra things. The only money we have right now is what is accumulating as interest from our 20% that was set aside on our claims money. 20% was taken out first, out of the 5 million something. That was set aside, that's put in, that principal will be in that federal bank. I don't know how long, just think about it. We think about it, and someday, whatever happens, that's going to still be going. We get the interest of that is about $7,000, close to $7,000 a month, and it's put in a different bank. And it is put out at interest, so it's growing a little bit. Now we have that money we can use. And we do use it once in a while when we get in a bind. We use it for different things. We have drawn some of that out and use it for some of the education department, because we have this year we have 11 people that we are helping with with their education, books and tuition.
I take it then you have no full-time employees.
Yes, we have some full-time employees, and they come. Les is a full-time person. We have CHR, and we have a lady and at the other end that keeps all the papers and the books, and we have Karen at the desk there. They're paid.
Are they, and they are tribal members?
None of them are. None of them are.
Is there a reason for that?
Three of them are Indian. Jackie just about has hers approved. She's part Cherokee. The reason is, when they were advertised for these positions, we took them on. We advertise and we give preference to Wyandottes, to other Indians, and to non-Indians, whatever, in that order, whatever you can, Les is the same as a Wyandotte now. He's Choctaw. Karen, I believe, is Cherokee, or something that way, different ones like that. We advertise the job, and who applies is the one who gets. One sad thing about the Wyandottes, people who learn a trade are gone. They're someplace else working. And at this point, up until now, it hasn't paid them to come back and work with us, because what we're paying is not minimum wage, but a lower rate of pay than they would get otherwise.
Offhand, how many tribal members would you say live in the general vicinity here?
I think they counted 270 or something like that in this area, right close.
And then the rest are scattered all over the United States?
All over the world.
All over the world.
We have some in Australia.
Do you really?
Mm-hmm. Up until just lately, we've had 3 of them in Hawaii.
Oh.
They were in the Navy.
But they continue to communicate.
Well, we know their addresses, and we hope that they'll keep us a current address, but maybe they won't. We do have a number of people yet. We don't know if they're still living or have no way of finding out about them. We still have some whose addresses we have never verified from the time that we got our claims money.
So really the last official roll, per se, for the tribe was 1985 or thereabouts?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Because then that...
some have updated, we have a few updated, but that's the last.
And you still operate out of the Miami office, or do they have anything to do with the connection with the tribe at all?
Oh yes, there's a connection, but most of it's done right here. At least we try to, because but they are a help. Mr. Nader is a good person to help, and the officials over there help. We haven't broken clear away from them yet. We hope the day comes that we'll be ready when they say, okay, the government is not taking care of any more Indians. And we know that someday that's going to happen. It may not be for 15 years or 20 years or something, but we know they will, because they have been wanting to get out of the Indian department business for a long time so far.
Well, there's a lot that's written and discussed about self-determination, the thing we're talking about. Some tribes are absolutely ready for it, and have been for many years, but other tribes simply are not.
That's true. That's true.
And they're holding off the day when that actually happens. And unfortunately, it's one of those things that you could name a dozen tribes just in Oklahoma alone that can't even agree among themselves and have so much intertribal squabbles that it paralyzes.
That's true. That's the truth.
Absolutely paralyzes their operations to the point that they're changing locks on tribal complex doors.
Yes, they are.
And having all sorts of spats and gunfire and little wonder the government views that.
That's right. That's right.
And saying, well, how do you want self-determination when you can't,
You
even
can't
handle your own
yes,
affairs?
yes. We have close by. We have a chief who never speaks to his business people. They don't all year, but they reelect them. They reelect them. They reelect them, and they can't get anything done.
I'm wondering if I'm finding this interesting, but what are we doing on time?
It's noon.
Is it? Well, why don't we?
Well, listen.